We're okay? Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Vesuvius Committee of the Whole meeting, February the 9th, 2021 at 9 a.m. in Council Chambers. And I will need a resolution that in accordance with Ministerial Order M192, the Town of Vesuvius Committee of the Whole meeting be closed to the public due to the inability to meet physical distancing recommendations made under the Public Health Act in Council Chambers located at 8707 Main Street, and that to ensure openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability, the Town of Vesuvius Committee of the Whole meetings will be recorded, live streamed, and published on the town's website. Councillor King, Councillor Bennett, all in favor? Thanks. And we need the approval of the agenda. And are there any late items, Mrs. Hilson? No, thank you. So we need a motion that the Committee of the Whole agenda of February the 9th be approved. Councillor Rhodes, Councillor Harvey, all in favor? Thank you. Adoption of the minutes. Committee of the Whole minutes from January the 26th. Need a motion, please, to adopt those. Councillor Bennett, Councillor Rhodes. All in favor? Thank you. No business arising from the minutes, and so our petitions and delegations. We have a delegation today from the Regional District, Okanagan-Similkameen, and we have Mr. Savino, Manager of Finance, on the line, and John Cote, who I am not quite sure what your title is, but he's in finance as well. And Area A Director Mark Pendergraft. So welcome to everyone, and we will let Mr. Savino or Mr. Cote start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council and staff. I'm here to, and so is John Cote, who's the accountant for the Regional District, to make a presentation first on the hospital budget and second on the Regional District budget. So with that, I'd like to turn over the presentation to John.
Hi, good morning. I'm just going to share my screen here.
Good.
If I can. I am sharing, okay. All right, I'm here this morning to present the Okanagan-Similkameen Regional Hospital District budget for 2021 and 5-year financial plan. In regards to the Regional Hospital District, it's the same board as RDOS. Typically, the responsibility of the Regional Hospital District is to provide capital funding for healthcare facilities and equipment in the region. The split between Interior Health and the Regional Hospital District on capital budgets is usually 40% of the projects is the Regional Hospital District share. Currently, the budget sits at second reading. The budget is required under the Hospital District Act to be passed by March 31st of this year. Right currently, the provisional 2021 budget is sitting at $15,228,286. In regards to some of the projects that are ongoing, one of the major ones that I'm sure you're all aware of is the Penticton Patient Care Tower project. The construction phase of the ambulatory care tower was completed and the facility was open to the public in April of 2019. Currently, I still think they're trying to finish up some deficiencies that were identified. I have no updates on that currently. Phase 2 of the project is currently ongoing, and that focuses on the renovation of existing areas of the old hospital. It includes the emergency wards, pharmacy, and material stores. They expect that project to complete sometime in 2022. That item at the bottom of this slide, that $2.987 million, that's just the progress payments in regards to the Penticton Patient Care Tower project that's required of the Regional Hospital District in 2021. This slide just presents the budget as it sits currently at second reading. I'll just highlight a couple of items on it. Starting at the top with the tax requisition. Currently, the tax requisition is being held at the same levels as it was in 2020 and 2019 at $6.447 million. For growth down to the capital grants line, it's sitting at just under 8.7 million. It was higher at first reading by 1.4 million, but there was one item on Interior House capital request list that was rejected by the Hospital District Board. I'll speak a bit more about that in a minute. And I'll take you to the bottom of the slide. The mill rate probably won't change much as long as the tax requisition pool stays the same. The average property in the whole region went up about 50 cents. This slide presents which each member municipality and rural area contributes to the entire tax requisition pool in 2021. The changes from 2020 result from the changes in the assessment roll from 2020. Typically, those changes are made up of changes in market evaluation and non-market evaluations. The non-market evaluations are typically new construction, renovations, typically assets that weren't there to be taxed in the prior year, that is now in the current year. This slide just summarizes what the current long-term debt that's being held by the hospital district organization. You'll see the first three items. Those debts have probably been held since the late 90s. They'll be matured and extinguished in the next year or two. And you'll note the larger item at the bottom. That relates to the hospital care tower project in Penticton Regional Hospital. That debt was issued in the spring of 2020. It's a 25-year debt, and we started making interest payments in the fall of 2020. In 2021, it's the first year we'll make both semi-annual interest payments and the one required principal payment. This slide summarizes the capital reserves that are currently held by the Regional Hospital District and projected out over the next 5 periods. I'll probably have some updates to this after the 2020 year end is completed. There might be some adjustments in regards to the contributions and reductions, but right now that's currently where the reserves stand at the end of 2020. You'll notice that there's a large reduction in 2021, and that's mostly going to pay for the payment from the hospital tower project at Penticton Regional. For the first, I guess, about 3 or 4 years of the project, it was mostly financed through short-term debt, which we've converted into long-term debt. This slide just summarizes just some of the capital requests we've received from Interior Health for 2021, the progress tower payments in 2021 and the debt servicing costs on that particular project. I will just direct you to line bullet point 2, the capital request over $100,000 at 3.9, almost $4 million. There was one item I said earlier that was rejected in the amount of $1.4 million. That was in regards to they're trying to establish a South Okanagan primary care network facility, but the board rejected at the hospital board meeting on January 21st, I believe that was. The other item that I'll point out is just the annual debt servicing cost on the hospital tower debt that we hold so far. It's just under $3.5 million. This slide just summarizes and calculates the average IHA requests over the past two 5-year periods. The first was from 2016 to 2020, and the 5-year average was just over $2.6 million. And as you can see, when I do the 5-year average for the period 2017 to 2021, it's gone up just over $500,000. Just as comparison, the 5-year average for 2015 to 2019 sat at about $2.1 million. So it's gone up about $1 million over the last 2 years. And that's the end of my presentation, and I want to thank you for having me, and I'll stand by through the chair just to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cote. Council, does anybody have any questions about the hospital district budget? Go ahead, Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you, Member Kordoff. John, just referring to your requisition summary quite early in your report there, I noticed that the Penticton Indian Band is part of that list, and I don't notice the Sirius Indian Band on there. Is there an explanation, or are they included in one of the other areas, or perhaps in the Sirius requisition?
I wasn't around when the Sirius Indian Band became a taxing authority, so we have an agreement with the Penticton Indian Band to make contributions to various services through RDOS or the hospital district, and that was signed in about 2008. I don't know, the Sirius Indian Band might contribute directly to any particular healthcare services on OIB, but I'm not aware of any of that information. But yeah, I don't really have any other information that might help answer that question.
I might be able to help. As far as the Indian bands go, it's at their option if they want to contribute or not. We can't make them. So the Penticton Indian Band agreed, but the other bands have not as of yet anyway.
Well, thank you, Jim. That explains it.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions? Go ahead, Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I'm just looking at your reserve, excuse me, taking $8 million out this year, moving forward, get you down to about $4 million. Do you feel quite comfortable with that small of reserve?
Well, it's been a discussion at the board table, and I think it will be a discussion in the next few months in regards to what level of reserve that the board would like to carry for the hospital district. I think if I think back to the time I started at the RDOS back in 2005, the board at the time was putting money away for the hospital tower project at Penticton Regional. So really, at that time, there wasn't a lot of reserves that were built up, so they built up a lot of reserves over time for that particular project. So right now, with that project coming to a conclusion, I believe Jim and I are going to bring something to the board in regards to, some sort of a policy or what level of reserves the board would like to carry for future projects.
So phase 2 will get completed with the funding this year, or like 221?
I'm sorry, come again?
Will phase 2 of the hospital, that's included in this budget for 221?
I
2020.
didn't quite hear your entire question. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Speak
The
into
budget you've made
microphone.
for 221, is there enough funding to finish phase 2, or will you have to be dipping into your reserve? And that's where I get nervous, you run out of money.
Well, we've sort of done some financial planning the last few years in regards to the split between the reserve funding and debt funding for this particular project. I think they were looking at about a 60-40 split. So once I'm done the corporate year ends for 2020, I'll have a better idea as to what level of reserves we may need to take out a little bit more debt in regards to the hospital tower project, just so that we can have a couple $1 million left in the reserve for any future projects in the region.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so thank you very much, Mr. Cote, for that presentation, and I assume we'll go back to Mr. Zaffino for the other. Am I correct?
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to actually share my screen with a PowerPoint presentation, but not the hospital. So I'm going
Okay.
But not the hospital one. I brought up the hospital
You need
on the mayor.
Yeah, we don't want the hospital one. We want the original one. The
Town of us, will you?
And- okay, he's not. I was looking at you. I thought maybe you were okay. Good. I figured it was him.
And here it is. So I'll just
Good.
make it larger.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So, thank you again, Mayor and Council staff. I'd like to present the 2021 budget, which has had first reading as of January 21st, 2021. Do want to emphasize it is first reading, and I'll be anticipating some changes between now and then. In fact, right after first reading, the board looked at having some changes for mosquito control and also how to use the COVID grant funding. And so that will change it at second reading. So with that, just a brief description on the budget structure. As you may or may not know, as municipalities could have 3 to 5 budgets. Regional districts have a budget for every service that we have. And for 2021, we have 155 separate services, so we have 155 separate budgets. Just as water and sewer in municipalities are self-sustaining, all 155 separate budget services are also self-sustaining, which means that the users, people that get the benefits from those services, also have to pay their tax portion. So I started working as manager of finance September 28th. It was quickly, I had to catch up and get the budget going. And so staff started giving me information on October 9th. And after that, on November 22nd, 30th, and December 13th, the budget was taken to the board for workshops, reviews, changes. Their changes and their asks were incorporated in the budget that you see. By policy and by the Local Government Act, we have to have the regional district budget adopted by March 31st. And I see that happening. I don't see it being late. So there's different types of services that the regional districts provide. The first one, and it's the one that the municipalities participate the most in, is regional services. So I listed the section of the regional services, and this is just a small portion. The next slide will have more. So with that, here's the rest of them. There's quite a few, and a lot of them, the town of Osoyoos does take benefit of these services. The next type of services that we also have is rural services. These are the opposite of the regional, where the majority of these services are used by electoral areas. And that's because electoral areas are big enough to have their own departments, like, for instance, building inspection, bylaw enforcement, etc., where municipalities do. So you'll have a building inspection department, and you will tax your taxpayers with whatever expenses are incurred in that area. Other services that we provide are shared services and local services. So on shared services, there's times, and a good example is the Fire Department of Kermias. That's a shared service in that the fire protection is for Kermias, Area B and G. So those 3 areas pay, and it's based on assessment. Another example would be for local services, which is just the opposite, and I use Amicus Mountain Fire Department. That one there is not shared with you. You have your own fire department. That's just for the people that are in electoral area A, and that's one of the best examples for the differences between shared and local. So again, talking about the budget process, you received the 2021 to 2025 budget. It has the anticipated tax increases. It is a work in progress, and I see that when it comes to second reading, there will be changes. And as I stated earlier, as of January 21st, first reading did occur, and that the last per legislation, March 31st, is the deadline. This you may find interesting, property assessments for the town of Vesuvius. So your area comprises 8.15% of the total assessment for the whole regional district, and that's down from 8.17. And I looked at this and just to make sure that rule of thumb applies and it looks correct. Your total assessments went up 1.45%, which includes the non-market change of 0.7. And as John stated earlier, it's something that I'm introducing into regional district budgets is the non-market change. So non-market change are the new houses out there, the new businesses, anything that was constructed last year that was not part of the tax assessment for your last budget. The average for the regional district for assessment is 1.7. So what that means is that the burden that you're paying for 2021 is less than the other years because your total assessment is lower than the average. If you have any questions along the way, just let me know. I will be glad to stop. So what is one of the major changes that occurred in this budget? There was a lot of debate in 2020 apparently regarding the administration fee, where the board was not exactly happy with the formula, and they asked staff to review in 2021 a new formula. So that was one of the first assignments that I was tasked with, not just looking at the budget, but also looking at the administration fee, which go hand in hand. I can't finish the budget until I do the administration fee. So what staff took to the board was a philosophy. Rather than looking at what number are you looking at and what you need to do to achieve that number, we went with the philosophy, and then a number came out from that. And what happened is the staff, when I say the staff, is I recommended that we look at the administration fee as a whole, take 20% of the administration fee and charge it against capital. So up until now, there has been time from staff for payroll, for human resources, for legislative services, computers, etc., to work on capital projects. However, there was no burden on charge to them on the administration. So I recommended to the board that does occur. And the other changes on the remaining 80%, which would go to operation, that would be based on the total cost of each service, less debt servicing and transfers to reserve, and obviously the previous year's administration wouldn't be charged there. So what that did is it, I believe it made it more fair. Also, there would be administration charge on salary. So in 2020, there was no administration on salary. What that did at the end of it, and this is something that I wasn't looking for, but it occurred because it's the philosophy that I was trying to achieve, is that the administration fee burden now went towards the electoral revenues and less towards the municipal partners. And the board members saw this, and it's a fair way of doing it. It can be looked at in the future if the board chooses to. However, as of now, it is much fairer than the 2020. And a good example is the administration fee for SIR, for instance. Last year it was $74,000. The year before that it was in the $11,000 range. This is a service where we issue maybe one or two checks a year, and here we charged them $74,000 last year. This year it's more. I think it's fair. It's approximately $17,000, and it changes slightly depending on if there was any operational changes. So that was one of the biggest major changes. What's added each year that isn't in the budget specific is the regional grants, the program service change requests, and the capital. So I just want to quickly talk about the actual grants. And these are the grant amounts that the board was looked at. You'll see that the authorized was 25,450, excuse me, and the request is over 64,000 almost. Last year, the board authorized just over $40,000. So these are the service level requests, something that I'm used to, and this is awesome that the regional district does it. The staff cannot automatically increase an FTE without the board approval and having a justification. So these were taken to the board and authorized by the board during the workshops. And you only pay if you get
Is there anything you can do, Brian, to tell him? Is there a chat thing that we can say?
CJ, can you hear us? Brian?
Uh-oh,
Maybe
nobody
the
can
phone
hear us?
shut down.
Anybody hear us?
We knew it was going too well.
Want me to just whack it?
I don't know, yeah, let's just take the dark.
Oh, oh dear.
Crack the place.
Oh. Okay, what does he say on there now? Somebody, or is that you? Oh,
I don't know why it would kick us.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by...
I've never had that happen.
there's always,
You entered 985749547.
About 3 slides up there.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID. Enter your participant ID. Please enter the meeting passcode followed by pound.
okay, CJ says the audio's okay.
You entered 18297. This meeting passcode is invalid. Please re-enter the meeting passcode followed by pound. You are in the meeting now. There are 5 participants in the meeting. You have been added to the waiting room. You cannot talk or listen until the host admits you to the meeting.
their share, and it's again, the majority is based on...
Excuse me, Mr. Zafino, we lost you back on, so we had to program the Zoom meeting again. Could you, I'm sorry about this, but when none of us heard you.
It's all right.
Could we go back to the page that has the program change and supplemental request? That is, yeah, that one.
Mhm.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
and we're now on, we can now hear you again.
Well, no problem. We've had our fair share of WebExes. This isn't the first time. So, okay, if I may just talk about, these are supplemental requests. What I stated earlier is that one of the things that this regional district does exceptionally well is staff's not allowed to add an FTE without the board's approval, and only at the time that the budget is being deliberated. So with that, there was a request for a 0.65 FTE. As you can see, the supplemental requests are charged to the various different, mostly electoral areas. However, there are some Oliver area C landfill, that's a portion charged to them. The charges in most cases are based on assessment. The higher your assessment in your area, the more you pay. However, there are user fees involved in these cases, such as the landfill. So with the next FTE request is the technical project manager. So this is a full-time FTE, and as stated by the staff, this is where it's anticipated that the costs will be charged against. And again, as you can see, it's electoral areas where the costs are being charged against. On this one here is the a partial increase on 2 staff members totaling 0.65, where the majority is for mosquito control. As recently as yesterday afternoon, the engineering department came to me and stated that they would like everything from the Maramata Water Department charges down to the bottom, all of our landfill, taken off the budget and only keep the $18,484 to mosquito control. That will go to the board. The board authorized these changes, and now, based on staff's recommendation, and now staff is saying, no, we'll reduce this. They want to keep the costs down based on where the budget is and the user fees. So one other thing I'd like to just discuss on the mosquito control, at the time that the budget was being deliberated, the board made a recommendation to reduce the tax requisition for mosquito control using reserves. Approximately 50% of the reserves, so $43,000 will be used to reduce the reserves. So the tax requisition that you see for your specific one, that I believe I got it here, is $2,004 a drop after I take into account the $43,000 reserves. So that will go to second reading. The last two FTE requests are specific to the Smoking and Recreation Department and the Oliver Landfill, and these will be charged against those service areas. So with that, talked about some capital projects. With the capital projects, these are the areas that would benefit your area and also electoral area A. We're looking at the costs. These are costs funded either through reserves or grants. So at one point in prior years, there was a tax requisition where we show reserves transfer to reserves, and this is where your money is going to. So also talking about capital, one of the reports that I've committed to take to a board is to split the capital budget and operating budget into two. Currently, there is 155 budgets, as I stated. However, those budgets are combined, operating and capital. So if you wanted to compare the budgets from one year to another, it's very difficult just because of the capital component. So I've recommended, and I'm used to, and municipalities do it all the time. It's just second nature to municipalities. You have two budgets. One operating, so there will be 155 operating budgets, and there'll probably be 80 to 90 capital budgets. Not all operating budgets have capital. So if the board accepts that, the 2022 budget will look a lot different. And this is one reason why I like to do that. This is an example of a summary of the 2020-2021 budget. As you can see, for 2020, it was 51.1 million under RDOS expenses. Well, that includes capital and grants. So that's something that I want to split out. And for 2021, I split it out into capital projects, the 9.2. That's being funded, as I said earlier, from capital and grants. But that's going to happen because either the grant's been accepted or the money is in reserves. However, 5.4 million is contingent on grants. So grants usually are 60-40, 70-30. There's a component where the money has to be shared, so we have to put it all in portion. So the 5.4 million are specific to the budget, but contingent. So only if and once we receive written notice that the grant has been authorized. So this following table actually just shows your tax requisitions and a reason why there is a variance. So as in your tax requisitions, it shows that your share is $902,626, and that's a decrease in the requisition 21,186, or 2.29%. And I thought it's important that you know why, where it's coming from, etc. And I just got some of the highlights. So there are increases in the budget, but the majority are decreases. So if we look at the very first one, 911, that's an increase, and essentially the tax requisition is at first reading, and it will and may change. The latest changes are the administration fee change, fire dispatch, which is a contract for a cord, increased 7,000, and also another contract for 13,000. So with your assessment, total, your burden on the expense, your taxes would be $1,700 for that specific one. A major tax reduction is $13,000 for regional tax, and that's 100% due to the Safe Start Transit grant. Now, there's two types of grants that are out there. One is municipal and regional district grants, and another one was a transit. On the local government one for the regional district municipality, you as a council and the board here had discretion to find eligible funds to reduce the taxes or pay for certain protective equipment. Under transit, we didn't. We were told this is what you get for each of the different services, and as far as for regional tax service, your share and benefit is $13,000, and that's again specific because of the transit Safe Start grant. Mosquito control, as I stated earlier, went up $2,004, and again that will go down once the reserve funds are applied, and that's going to happen in the second meeting. These are one of the main services that are not taxed by assessment. This one's taxed by usage. The more complaints that we get, the more need we need to be in your area or any of the other areas. We keep track, and we look at 3-year floating average just to be fair to everyone. The board is looking at this, staff's looking at this to see how if it is the fairest model. The arena service usually has capital projects, and it did drop. I looked at that long and hard why it dropped, and one of the biggest reasons is that up until now I noticed that some of the capital component of that area was funded by taxes, and in this year I looked back on not the notes, but the dollars that the previous people before me put in there, and some of the capital is being funded by grants. So the other thing that's important to note is SIR. So there's right at this moment there's a decrease of $4,194. However, at the time of first reading, their budget was not finalized. This is one of the budgets that the board does not have any control of. Essentially, the board has said, so this is what it is, and then we have to enter it. I do understand that they were going to look at it at the end of January, so I'm sure they'll be receiving something in the next few days. And again, that will be finalized at second reading. Regional trails, that did increase, and total budget increase is 15.2%. I've itemized the reasoning, and some of the reasons is essentially the vehicles. One of the things that staff's going to be looking at is the minimum and maximum reserve balances on pretty well all the services that we have and all the equipment that we have. We just hired a asset management position, and with that position, we'll be helping her look at the GFOA best practices, which one of the things that from my previous job, one of the practices that we set up became a standard as for best practices, and I like the regional district to be on that list for best practice. So these are the services that the regional district provides, and one of the things that I'm stating based on I'll just step back a bit. Not too long ago, I was on the other side of the desk where I was on the municipal side, looking at the regional district expenses. And one of the things that I was reminded of when I came to the regional district is that we're not taxing necessarily the residents of the city. We're taxing the residents that are the city but are also regional district residents. And these are the benefits that regional districts provide. And these are, I've got the 2020 and 2021 tax requisitions and the net change. These are the rest of them. As stated earlier, the Sterile Police program is not so definitive yet. It still has to come in. Okanagan Basin Water Board is. They gave me their budget, so that 2574 should not change. And at one of the last slides, I'm almost finished, I promise, is all of the tax requisitions for the river municipalities and the electoral areas. I just want to make a correction that was in the Penticton paper that said Penticton's paying the full $6 million for the municipal side. As you can see, and as you probably know, they're not. The biggest portion is Penticton with $2.1 million. However, the total requisition is $20.6 for all of the members and auxiliaries in Penticton Indian Belt.
Excuse me,
This is
Mr.
just
Savino. Mr. Savino, could we have a
Yeah.
question here? Could we interrupt and ask a question?
Yes,
Go ahead.
yes.
Councillor Bennett.
Hi, Jim, Councilor Bennett here. Just a question on, back to 19, it's just kind of it says capital projects benefiting the town of Osoyoos. And I go back through here and I go down through there and there's a couple things, capital project benefit and regional trails master plan. But all the rest of the stuff, it looks like it's all, most of the money's going to Smilkmeen Trail construction, Okanagan River, KVR Trail, Chute Lake expansion. So I don't see a lot benefiting the town of Osoyoos here. So I kind of, when I see that, I'm not too sure what you're trying to show us here. Or who decides which construction of which trails get done.
So if you look at the slide that's in front of you now, and if you look at work from the bottom, regional trails, where it says Department 7720.
Yeah.
So you're paying a portion. So your portion of regional trails is $25,072, $3,000 more. So you're paying for a portion of regional trails. So because you're paying a portion, I included it into your areas. So I thought I wanted to give you the respect and give you a backup of where your money is going. I did that with all of the different municipalities that have been to regional trails also. I've included them. So if you look at the presentation I did for Oliver yesterday, you'll see the exact same thing.
So how is it decided on the trails, like if you're gonna spend money over in the Smilkmeen, or if you're gonna do it in Oliver, or if you're gonna do it up on, say, the KVR between OK Falls and Penticton, how is that decided? Is it so much percent each year? Or who decides which trails are gonna get that majority of that funding?
So staff would make a recommendation to the board, and based on, and it doesn't mean it's going to make it. The board then deliberates. And if you take a look at this specific requisition at the very top here, it says participating directors determine budget by weighted vote. So what that means is that the board as a whole votes on the budget, and they know the specific reasons. Something new that the board received this year that I actually brought back with me from Barcelona, where I came from. It's an itemized list of all the projects based on the department type of work with the cost. So the board did receive all of these information, but a lot of it comes from the original recommendation from staff. I'm requiring and requesting staff from now on to do a 5-year plan, so your board doesn't get any surprises and have to concentrate specifically for the current year, but they can look at overall to make sure that it's fair for all of the regions.
Okay, that makes sense, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I just go back a couple of slides and ties into what Councillor Bennett said. You got a budget here of $186,000 for regional trails, parks, and trails. When's the timeline for that to be finished for your master plan?
Okay, I don't have the timeline, but I can
You
take
got
a
to go
look
up
at
about
that.
2 slides, 3 slides go up, back up 3 slides?
This is the one that says 2021 capital
Yeah,
projects.
2021 capital projects
That's it.
benefiting, yeah,
That's it.
about the fourth,
So hopefully,
that one
we're
right there.
talking about this one,
Yes,
100 days.
yes.
Okay, so hopefully when it's within the current year, this one here says carry forward, so it's a carry forward from previous years. The money will be committed in the year that the board authorized it. You try to finish it in the year that it's approved. However, there's things like COVID, especially last year, things did not get done, and hopefully the master plan will be in 2021.
So I presume when that's finished, that gives you direction on sort of which areas to do first?
Yes, usually that's what happens. One of the things that I like to do, and I'll have to ask the staff, is when the reports come in, we actually itemize it with the dollars and the time frame, and then the board can take a look and prioritize it, and we can take a look at how much we can afford each year, and we draw a line, and after anything above the line will go into the current year, anything below will go in the previous year, in other years.
I got one more.
Go ahead.
I have one more question. Back to the slide you were on previously, at the bottom for transit for the South Okanagan, the budget was cut by about 13,000. Presumably you got a grant. Is there any way to put that 13,000 back in the budget to create more service for the South Okanagan?
So the reason that's lower is we didn't cut the service is we received the COVID Transit Safe Start Fund. And one of the things that we'll be looking at is if we are under budget, one of the new policies that the board authorized the staff to do is any surpluses will no longer be used to artificially reduce the tax requisition. It will go into reserves, and at that point, the board can use it any way they wish. And the majority of it would be to increase services or use it for bus shelters, et cetera. But that will be up to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Safino.
So that was it. I'm finished. I'll be glad to take any other questions that you may have.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions of Mr. Savino? No, it sounds like your questions have been answered, and we really appreciate the fact that you've been with the regional district for less than 6 months, and you are able to talk about all these things so well. So thank you very much for presenting this to us and for answering the questions. And I know that we're still in dealing with this at the board table. So we really appreciate it, and thank you for the slides, which we have, and we will be able to look back and certainly give you a call if we have any other concerns. So
Thank you very much.
thank you. So
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. And Director Pendergast, thank you very much for your support. I really appreciate he was helped me a lot of the information that you received from me. I ultimately at one point rather got from him.
Thanks.
okay.
Thanks again, Jim.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mark. You joined us as well. So I
Just
don't.
gotta take that down, I believe.
Well, it's just we're at the end of the.
I know,
Yeah.
but I think he's got to take it down.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Hi, Mark.
Bye.
Okay. So we do not have any new business. I will entertain a motion to terminate the meeting, please.
So moved.
Councillor King, Councillor Rhodes, all in favor?